Keith, Costas continues to mark the highs and lows of every team in baseball. And last year's Orioles, many more highs than lows, a team that far exceeded expectations. Keith.
Yes, Matty, many more highs than lows, as you mentioned. We could have picked from a number of points in the season, but where I'm going, August 21st against the Red Sox. Now, this might seem like just a run-of-the-mill win with a quarter of the season left to go, but Matty, right up your alley, what this meant for them, they hit their over on August 21st. They got there 3 weeks before any team, more than 20 games over what the number was projected coming into the year by season's end. You see it right here. Wow. Lowest over-under in either league coming into the year, end up with a winning season. And like I said, get to that number a full 3 weeks before any other team. And when you look at it, it was really the Adley Rutschman show. I mean, obviously a lot of things went well for the Orioles, but take a look at these numbers. A little bit of a slow start in his first 15. From that point forward, and Bill, I know you're huge on WAR, just a huge WAR fan. The second best player by that metric in the entire sport over that span behind one, Aaron Judge. And you see the standings that line up with those same dates from June 10th on. They were the best team in the American League East from that point forward. So I don't think we're going to see it this year, guys. It's just not enough of a track record just yet, but I'm not going to be surprised if at this time next year, when we do top 10 right now, we're talking about Adley Rutschman as the #1 catcher in the game.
I wouldn't doubt that either. And my kind of high point of the season for the Orioles is also Rutschman related, but it really was a team dynamic, and it came on July 8th. They came back after being held completely quiet by Angels lefty Reed Detmers. They were down to their final strike in 4 straight at-bats in the bottom half of the ninth. And Adley Rutschman had a big double as a part of this run-scoring rally. They ended up walking off the Angels. A big crowd, floppy hat night, and it kind of turned for me in terms of, hey, this team is for real. Like it was a cute story for a while, and everybody was giving credit to the big wall in left as to saving their pitching staff. But after they traded their closer and their senior most offensive player at the deadline, everybody thought, wow, I guess they're punting. You know, they were pretty good, but whatever. They were still really good. And nobody really knew how good Felix Bautista was until we watched him pitch. That's why they could trade their closer. Baltimore put something together that was a lot of fun last year. And I say nothing but upward and onward down the road.
There's 2 things I want to hit on with Adley Rutschman. First of all, the WAR issue right there, Keith. I actually think he's a WAR of about 20. Because before he came up, they were X. After he came up, they were X. And he was basically the guy. So I'm looking at him in the lineup saying, this is the difference maker. The other thing, too, could you put up that board again, guys, that showed his slow start when he got out of the gate slowly? Oh, thank you, Harold, because that's what I thought.
You're filling in beautifully for Harold, Bill. This is exactly how he does this.
No, this is beautiful, because look at this. I actually think those first 15 games actually solidified Adley Rutschman as being the guy. Because when he scuffled, he's still out there greeting the pitcher coming off the mound every 3 outs. That's his thing. And he became, I think, the true leader of the team. What happens if he comes up in the first week of the season, he goes bridge 4 times, he's hitting the ball all over the yard, then he looks like Johnny Rah-Rah.
Yeah, right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I watch him and I'm watching every 3 outs. Pitcher could give up a field goal, give up a 3-run homer. And they still get the 3rd out. He comes over and he says something, either pats him on the backside, doesn't say much. Big out with man on 2nd and 3rd, 2 outs, punchy, and he's fist pumping him and firing the guys up. I actually thought that slow start might actually had everybody on that team look at him going, you know what, this dude's real. Because if he gets off to a hot start, there could be a little bit of fake rah-rah stuff in there.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And he did not change in any way. He never let anything, that 150 start, hurt him behind home plate. He looked like he was an animal, and he looks like he has the respect of every pitcher that's out there on the staff. So good for him, but I think that's the clear leader of that squad.
It's a great point. I didn't realize how closely those numbers through his first 15 career games resembled those of Alex Bregman. And we know how Bregman took off after a bad 15-game start to his career. All right, Keith, what about the lows, if we would, on the Orioles?
Yeah, well, you mentioned one of the logical choices, Matty. Them selling at the deadline was obviously disappointing to some Oriole fans, but I think in hindsight, it makes sense given where they're at in their progression. So for the low, I'll go with how September played out for them against the Blue Jays. You mentioned it. They kept playing well after the trade deadline. They just 2 games back of the Jays coming into September. They had 3 series with them, 10 games. They went 3-7 and lost all 3 series. It was the most common matchup between any 2 teams in the majors in the last month of the season with those 10 games. And while it was probably a long shot they were going to make the postseason, this really solidified their fate, not being able to take care of business against Toronto.
Yeah, I think that's probably the one I would hang to as well. I mean, it's hard to even put this as a low because, again, the greater sum was that they far exceeded anything that was expected of them last year. So the fact that they scuttered or shuffled down the stretch, really not. It wasn't that much of a blemish, is what I'm saying.
That
Agreed.
actually might be a good thing in hindsight when they look at it because they know what they have to do to get over the hurdle. They played the Yankees tough. They battled the Yankees. They played the Rays tough. And Toronto was the team that seemed to be having to push the foot on the gas pedal a little bit more and took care of business against them. But I would imagine somewhere in there, they're in spring training, they have a little conversation saying, okay, we know what we have to do. We saw it firsthand. This is what we have to do to get better.
A good story in Baltimore this year. Keith, thanks for that.